I gave 8 years of my life to that office. Late nights, missed birthdays, endless deadlines. This morning, my boss smiled like a snake and told me to go home indefinitely. No warning, no explanation. Just like that, my career was over. I drove home in silence, numb, until I remembered the one thing they didn't know I had: a video. A video that could burn everything they'd built to the ground. I could end his career overnight. But if I released it, I might take a lot of innocent people down with him. The question was, did I care? At 2 a.m., the office was a dim aquarium of screens. My desk lamp the only warm light in a sea of blue. Fingers stiff, eyes dry, I stared at code that had stopped speaking to me hours ago. How many birthdays, dinners, and bedtimes had I bartered for this? If you've ever made that trade, you know the debt it leaves. A cleaning cart squeaked past. Then the logs flashed something strange. A malformed token slipping through validation like it had a key. I traced it, ran the test again. There it was, partial customer data leaking where it never should. My pulse climbed. I could stitch the hole, but not in this fog. I locked it down, made a private note, recorded a quick demo, and promised myself I'd fix it in the morning. I shut the lamp, let darkness reclaim the room, and rode the elevator with a janitor who nodded like we shared a secret. Outside, the city's grid glowed, a circuit board under glass. I drove home, rehearsing the email I'd send. Facts, fix, timeline. Dawn would make it cleaner. The house was quiet when I slipped inside, the kind of stillness that dares you to disturb it. I fell into bed, the bug's details looping in my head like a chorus I couldn't shake. At 6 a.m., my phone buzzed. Richard's name filled the screen. "Morning, Alex," he said, voice neat and too bright. 8 sharp with leadership. Bring your laptop. Good news. He coughed on good. And grab a temp badge at security. Before I could answer, he hung up. Good news at this hour was a wolf in borrowed wool. I sat on the edge of the bed, looking at my daughter tangled in her blanket, one arm around a lopsided panda. I counted my breaths until the tightness eased. By 8, I was in the lobby with a coffee I didn't want. Security handed me a temp badge and a smile that never touched their eyes. Upstairs, the glass conference room gleamed in the middle of the floor, everyone pretending not to watch. For a foolish minute, I let myself believe. Maybe this was recognition. 8 years of late nights, of patching leaks no one saw, could finally mean something. Richard met me at the door, grin tight. Inside, 2 HR reps sat at one end of the table. Dylan stood beside him. My Thursday taco partner, my midnight meme supplier, eyes fixed anywhere but on me. Between us sat a folder that seemed to weigh more than paper should. "Let's keep this brief," Richard said, arranging his face into something soft. "Concerns about team fit, resistance to feedback. We'd like you to go home indefinitely while we determine next steps." Each phrase was polished until it cut without resistance. "Indefinitely," I repeated, the word foreign in my mouth. "You'll remain on payroll for now," he added, smiling like a man offering a consolation prize. "May I ask what triggered this?" I said. "Feedback from across the team," he replied, palms up in a gesture that meant nothing. I looked at Dylan, searching for a flicker of solidarity. He studied the platter of croissants like they might explain the world. I slid my laptop across the table. Policies, you understand? Dylan stepped aside. Richard leaned toward him, lips barely moving, a whisper stitched into a smile. Dylan nodded, still not looking at me. If I blinked, I might have missed it, but the chill it left stayed. I signed the acknowledgement form HR pushed toward me, the pen feeling heavier than it should. Walking out, the brightness stung my eyes. In the elevator, my reflection looked like someone already half erased. The garage was cool and still. I sat in the car until the silence felt like it belonged. Indefinitely, I said aloud, tasting it again. At home, the front door had barely shut before my daughter hurtled into me. "You're home early. Did you get fired?" she asked, eyes wide, voice innocent. "I'm home for a while," I said, kneeling to her height. "That means pancakes on weekdays." She cheered, and for a moment, the rest of it didn't matter. In the kitchen, batter hissed on the skillet. My wife came in, robe drawn tight, scanning my face. "What happened?" "They want me home for a bit," I said. "Indefinitely," she echoed, no sugar in her tone. "Are you okay?" "We'll figure it out," I told her, a truth I hoped would grow into itself. My daughter chattered about a dream involving a dog on roller skates, syrup dripping in bright threads between us. But behind her words, I saw the blue glow of the office, the malformed token waltzing past our gates. I had promised to fix it in the morning. Morning had other plans. And as I cleared the plates, I replayed that whisper in the conference room. The way both Richard and Dylan had looked at me. Not like a colleague, not even like an opponent, but like a man already gone. 2 days after being sent home, my phone lit up with a push notification from the company's LinkedIn page. "Congratulations to Richard Cole, recipient of the Leadership Excellence Award." The caption bragged about his innovative data integrity strategy, illustrated with bullet points ripped straight from the report I'd authored last quarter. If you've ever seen someone else's name on your work, you know the peculiar burn it leaves, equal parts betrayal and disbelief. I clicked through the comments, a parade of congratulations from people who hadn't been in the room, hadn't stayed past midnight to write the code or patch the leaks. My inbox pinged, an old colleague sending me a screenshot from the company's internal newsletter. My name wasn't mentioned once. I still had limited access to my email archives, so I started digging. Buried under layers of forwards and CCs was a chain between Richard and upper management. 3 months ago, they'd outlined a transition plan for my role. The language was dressed up in corporate politeness, reallocation of resources, aligning skill sets, but the dates lined up exactly with when Richard had started cutting me out of meetings. The subject line was almost absurd in its casual cruelty. Project alignment. Alex. Scrolling further, a private message thread popped up. Richard to HR. Timestamped the week before they benched me. Clear by Friday. My name was in the line above it, like an exhibit in a trial I didn't know I was having. I sat back, the weight of those 4 words pressing into my chest. Clear by Friday, like I was a stain. I needed to hear another voice, so I called Dylan. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey," I said, "can we talk? Off the record." A pause stretched long enough for me to hear a background chatter. Office voices, the clink of ceramic. "Now's not great," he said. "They're keeping a close eye." "It's me, Dylan. We've shared drinks, late night fixes. Just tell me what's going on." He exhaled. "Look, Alex, they think you're not a team player. That's all I can say." Then the line went dead. Later that afternoon, I saw his name on an internal incident report, one that claimed I'd ignored a direct instruction, causing a critical delay. I hadn't even been assigned that task. My hands curled tight on the edge of the desk. Dylan had put it in writing. The same man who used to send me memes about Richard's incompetence. I left the house, walking until I found myself at the corner cafe where I'd spent countless mornings before work. The smell of burnt espresso and warm pastries wrapped around me like an old coat. I took my usual seat by the window, ordered a black coffee, and let my mind drift back to my first week at the company. How proud I'd been to land the job, how the city lights outside the office had looked like a map of the future I was building. I could still see that younger version of me in the reflection of the glass, sleeves rolled up, eyes bright, ready to prove himself. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you were set up. Can't talk here. They're watching. No name, no context, just the kind of message that makes the air feel thinner. I typed back, "Who is this?" But the reply never came. Back at my desk, I dug deeper into the shared drive. My access was hanging by a thread, but there were still cracks in the wall. In the video folder for internal meetings, I found a recording mislabeled as a team sync. I clicked play. Richard was leaning back in his chair, talking to two other managers. Of course, the numbers were massaged. He was saying, smirking, if Alex had known, he'd have blown it up weeks ago. This way, we get the rollout, and he takes the fall if anyone digs. I froze the frame on his face, smug, sure of his insulation from consequence. My reflection in the laptop screen looked like a man I barely recognized, someone standing on the thin edge between outrage and opportunity. The file was already downloading to my personal drive when I noticed the meeting date, 2 days before they called me in to go home indefinitely, clear by Friday. The video sat on my desktop like a live wire. I could drag it into an email, hit send, and watch Richard's career evaporate before lunch. But every frame of it was threaded with the names and faces of people on my team. Developers who'd had no say in his decisions. Analysts who'd just done what they were told. If this went public, they'd all be caught in the blast radius. If you've ever wanted revenge so badly you could taste it, you'll know the sickness that comes when you realize it might burn the wrong people. I stared at the file, weighing destruction against mercy, wondering if the two could exist in the same plan. That night, as I pieced together a timeline of Richard's manipulations, I noticed an unusual folder in the shared drive, one that didn't belong to me. Inside were screenshots of financial statements, procurement orders, and compliance reports. Each one had notes in the margins, questions about discrepancies and forged signatures. Whoever had made them wasn't just looking at code, they were building a case. At the bottom of the folder was a single text file. We need to talk. No name, no date, just that line. It wasn't meant for me, but it was there, unguarded. Someone else was hunting Richard, and maybe the same bigger fish I'd glimpsed. Before I could dig further, a new email slid into my inbox from HR, confidential, invitation to private discussion. It was set for 9 a.m. the next day in one of the small glass-walled rooms on the executive floor. Sleep was a rumor that night. I kept seeing the text file, the open folder, the way Richard's voice had curled around the words, "He takes the fall." If this meeting was a trap, I needed to be the one setting it. Morning came sharp and thin. The private discussion room was bright enough to make the white walls hurt my eyes. Richard was already there, leaning on the table with an ease that didn't belong to an innocent man. 2 HR reps flanked him, their smiles tight as stapled paper. "Alex," Richard said, gesturing to the chair opposite him, "we wanted to offer you an opportunity to leave gracefully." I sat, folding my hands. Gracefully? I repeated. He slid a document across the table. Voluntary resignation agreement, complete with a paragraph about a positive reference contingent on my signing today. This keeps your record clean, he said. You can move on, no questions asked. If you've ever been offered a lifeboat, while the man who sank the ship smiles at you, you know the urge to set it on fire. I thought of my wife's voice the night before. I just need you to stay true to your principles. Principles don't pay bills, but they keep you from selling pieces of yourself you can't buy back. I reached into my bag, pulled out my laptop, and opened the meeting video. The room filled with Richard's voice. The numbers were massaged. If Alex had known, he'd have blown it up weeks ago. Stop this, one HR rep said quickly. Too late, I said. This isn't the only copy. Richard leaned back, trying to smirk, but the edges were fraying. You really think this will? I know it will. I cut in. Because 30 seconds from now, every member of the board will have it in their inbox. His eyes flicked to the HR reps, then to the door, like he could outrun what was coming. On my screen, the upload counter hit 100%. Somewhere in the building, inboxes began to ping. That's a breach of... One HR rep started. No, I said, closing the lid. That's evidence. For a beat, no one moved. Then one of the board members, someone I'd only met in passing, stood from the corner where he'd been silently observing. His face was pale, his jaw tight. Without a word, he left the room, the door clicking shut like a verdict. Richard's voice was lower now. You don't know what you've started. Neither do you, I said. And for the first time in weeks, I meant it. By the next morning, the video was everywhere. I hadn't sent it beyond the board, but someone had. Clips of Richard's smug admission were being dissected on Twitter, stitched into TikToks, narrated over on YouTube channels with titles like Corporate Snake Gets What's Coming. The hashtag Justice for Alex was climbing fast, pulling my name into a spotlight I'd never asked for. If you've ever been defended by strangers, you know the disorienting mix of gratitude and dread. Was this justice or just a feeding frenzy? News outlets began calling before breakfast. My inbox flooded with messages from old colleagues and complete strangers, some offering jobs, others just thanking me for standing up. In the chaos, one email stood out. No subject line, just an attachment. A folder of scanned financial records, invoices, and what looked like doctored tax filings. Whoever sent it had highlighted discrepancies. Contracts awarded to shell companies. Inflated invoices approved with Richard's signature. This was bigger than a massaged metric. This was fraud. Before I could process it, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We're on the same side, but don't trust anyone too long. No signature, no follow-up. The kind of message that tightens your throat without telling you why. I typed back, "Who are you?" But the three little dots never appeared. That afternoon, I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by printouts, connecting lines with a pen, like I was mapping a crime drama. The more I followed the money, the more I saw patterns Richard couldn't have engineered alone. There were approvals from higher up, signatures that belonged to someone with far more reach. That's when I found her name. Claire Morton, Vice President of Operations. She'd been in the company for over a decade, known for streamlining processes, which now looked a lot like cutting corners for profit. The realization hit with an odd relief. Richard wasn't the mastermind. He was a pawn who'd gotten comfortable thinking he was a king. And someone had just helped me see the board. I closed the files, when my daughter came into the kitchen, holding a wooden spoon like a scepter. "We're making pasta," she announced. My wife handed me an apron without a word, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders drop. We chopped garlic, stirred sauce, laughed when she insisted on taste testing every other minute. If you've been in a storm long enough, you forget how steady the air can feel when it breaks. But the calm didn't last. That evening, HR sent me a formal email. They were handling the matter internally and appreciated my cooperation. My stomach sank. Internal handling was code for burying it until no one cared. I almost closed the laptop when another message came through. This one from the same anonymous source. More files, this time with Claire's name all over them. Approvals for fraudulent vendors. Internal memos instructing staff to reclassify expenses. Enough to make the internal handling impossible. The next day, news broke that the company had contacted federal investigators. Someone inside had forced their hand. I didn't know if it was my mystery ally or a board member who didn't want to be implicated, but the case was out of HR's reach now. That evening, I left the house to clear my head. The parking garage under my building was dim, the air heavy with oil and concrete dust. As I rounded the corner to my spot, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. Tall, tailored suit, hair pinned in a perfect twist. It was Claire Morton. The same signature I'd seen on half the fraudulent approvals was now attached to the faint smile on her face. "Mr. Brooks," she said, voice smooth enough to coat a blade. "We should talk." Claire's heels clicked against the concrete, each step deliberate, measured. "You've stirred quite the storm," she said, stopping a few feet from me. "And yet, you're still standing. That's rare in our world." She studied me like a chess player studying a piece she wasn't sure she wanted to sacrifice. "You've got a choice, Alex. You can stand on the right side of this and protect your future. Or," she let the word hang, "you can keep chasing shadows until you burn yourself out." I held her gaze. "And which side is the right one?" "The one that survives," she said simply. "Work with me and you'll land on your feet. I can make this disappear. For you. If you've ever had a lifeline dangled in front of you with a hook hidden in it, you know the taste it leaves." My mind ran the equation. Security versus truth. Comfort versus justice. "And Richard?" I asked. Her lips curved. "Richard's done. I'm not in the business of saving pawns." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out to see a message from an unknown number. This one, not so cryptic. "They're about to fire me. I'm the one who sent you the files. Needed you to know before I'm gone." My pulse spiked. The anonymous ally was a real person. Someone inside HR. And now they were about to be erased. Claire was still talking, but her voice was fading under the roar in my head. This wasn't just about me anymore. It hadn't been for a while. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and looked her in the eye. "I think you already know my answer." Her smile thinned. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe," I said, turning toward my car, "but it'll be mine to make." Upstairs, I sat at my desk, staring at the open folder of evidence. I opened a new message, attached every file I had, Richard's admissions, Claire's approvals, the financial fraud, and addressed it to a curated list of journalists I trusted. My finger hovered over send for a breath, then I typed 2 words into my secure chat. "Activate Plan B." The message shot off into the encrypted dark. By morning, the headlines were unavoidable. Whistleblower exposes massive fraud at tech giant. News anchors replayed the meeting clip alongside spreadsheets from the leaked files. Analysts debated how deep the rot went. The company's stock plunged like a bird with broken wings. My phone didn't stop ringing. The HR ally texted me once more. "I'm out. Thank you for not letting them bury this." I replied simply, "Stay safe." Later that week, I drove out to see my mother. She lived in the same clapboard house I'd grown up in, the porch sagging a little more each year. She poured coffee and sat across from me, eyes searching my face. "Your father," she said quietly. "He had a chance once to do something right. He didn't, and it haunted him. You didn't walk away." It was a strange kind of blessing, part pride, part warning. Back in the city, a call came from a blocked number. The voice on the other end was smooth, calculated. "We've been following your work," the man said. "Your persistence. We think it should continue." It was an executive from a rival firm offering resources to help maintain pressure on my former company. They'd cover legal fees, investigative costs, anything to keep the story alive. It wasn't altruism. They wanted the competition to bleed. But in this war, their goals and mine aligned. I accepted the help, knowing alliances like this were built on sand. The battle wasn't over. It was expanding. That night, as I was sorting through yet another wave of documents, my phone rang again. This time, it was Richard. His voice was hoarse, stripped of the arrogance it once carried. "Alex," he said, "you don't understand. There's more. Claire's not the top. There's someone else, someone bigger. And they'll come for you too." Before I could ask who, the line went dead. The offer came on a Tuesday morning. An email with no logo, no corporate fluff, just a single line. "We'd like you to build with us." It was signed by 3 people I knew all too well. Former colleagues, all casualties of Richard and Claire's regime. They'd started a small but growing firm with one principle carved into its foundation: transparency above profit. They wanted me on board, not just as an employee, but as a partner. Joining them felt like stepping onto solid ground after years of quicksand. The air in their office hummed with purpose, the kind that doesn't need slogans on walls to prove it's real. Still, the question lingered in my mind: does forgiving mean forgetting, or just letting go before the weight drowns you? If you've been wronged deeply enough, you know the answer isn't as clean as you'd like it to be. For a while, things felt almost normal. We planned projects, pitched clients, even laughed without that edge of caution in our voices. Then, during a budget review, I noticed a name buried in a subcontractor list, a shell company I recognized from the fraud files. A little digging confirmed it. The firm was owned by a major conglomerate with a reputation for swallowing smaller companies and bending them to its will. The realization hit cold. Even here, the shadows stretched long. I didn't tell anyone right away. Instead, I let myself have a morning that was mine alone. I drove my daughter to school for the first time in months, listening as she chattered about a science project and a class pet rabbit named Jupiter. When she hopped out, backpack bouncing, she turned and waved with a grin so wide it lit the parking lot. Pride swelled in my chest, not for what I'd exposed, but for the simple fact that I was here to see it. Back at my desk, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. It's them again. "Ready?" My stomach tightened. I stared at the screen, wondering if this was the same ally from before, or someone entirely new pulling at a different thread. The weeks that followed blurred into a steady climb. I was invited to speak at a small industry panel about workplace ethics. That led to interviews, op-eds, and eventually an invitation to help lead a coalition of employees from across the sector. We weren't just sharing horror stories. We were building a framework for protection, advocacy, and change. Somewhere along the way, I became the face of the movement, an uncomfortable fit, but one I learned to wear. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. At a strategy session for the coalition, I was introduced to a new supporter, someone with deep pockets and influence. When she walked into the room, I felt the air shift. It was Dylan. The same Dylan who had once stood silent beside Richard as they sent me home indefinitely. He looked older, sharper, maybe even sorry. "We've both been burned," he said quietly after the meeting. "I want to make it right." I didn't answer right away. Trust isn't a light switch you can flick back on. But the coalition needed resources, and Dylan had them. If you've ever had to work with someone who once cut you down, you know it's a dance between strategy and self-preservation. That night, after the meeting, I came home to find the house quiet. My daughter was asleep, curled under her blanket, hair fanned across the pillow. I sat on the edge of her bed and whispered, "I kept my promise, and I'm not done yet." I was halfway to the kitchen when I heard the soft scrape of paper against wood. At the front door, a thick envelope had been slid through the mail slot. No return address, no markings, just weight and silence, waiting to be opened.